The worst mistake my ex-husband ever made wasn't humiliating me in public. It was believing I would stay the same woman afterward. The ballroom shimmered beneath thousands of crystal lights suspended from a ceiling painted with gold accents and soft ivory clouds. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, while waiters carried silver trays through clusters of guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The Walker family had spared no expense. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Ryan Walker's younger sister was getting married, and half of Chicago's business elite seemed to be gathered beneath the same roof. Laughter floated through the air. Champagne glasses clinked together. Cameras flashed. Everything looked perfect, at least from a distance. Evelyn Carter Walker stood near the back of the reception hall, beside a marble column wrapped in white roses. Her pale blue dress was elegant but simple compared to the luxury surrounding her. She smoothed a wrinkle from the fabric and watched Ryan from across the room. He looked exactly like the man she had fallen in love with 8 years earlier. Tall, confident, handsome enough to command attention without trying. But something in his smile had changed over the years. It had become sharper, colder, like a door slowly closing. There she is. The voice came from behind her. Evelyn turned. 2 women from Ryan's social circle exchanged glances before smiling politely. Not warmly, politely. The kind of smile people offered when they were pretending not to judge someone. Evelyn, one of them said, "You look nice." The compliment landed strangely, like an obligation. "Thank you," Evelyn replied. The women nodded and drifted away toward another conversation before she could say anything else. Evelyn looked down at her hands. This had become normal. People used to speak with her. Now they spoke around her. The music swelled as guests moved toward the center of the ballroom. The newly married couple had just finished their first dance. Applause echoed beneath the chandeliers. Ryan stepped onto a small stage near the head table and tapped his glass with a spoon. The room gradually quieted. Hundreds of faces turned toward him. Ryan smiled. "Before we continue tonight," he said smoothly, "I'd like to say a few words about family." More applause. Evelyn straightened slightly. Ryan was good at speeches. He always had been. "Family is everything," he continued. "They support you when you're building something meaningful. They stand beside you through challenges. And sometimes," a few guests laughed as Ryan paused dramatically, "sometimes they teach you exactly who doesn't belong in your future." The laughter grew louder. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Ryan's eyes moved through the crowd. Then they landed directly on her. A strange silence settled inside her chest. "Success requires difficult decisions," Ryan continued. "And sometimes you outgrow people who refuse to grow with you." More laughter. More nodding heads. Evelyn suddenly became aware of how many people were looking at her. The room felt warmer. The lights seemed brighter. Ryan took a sip from his glass. "I spent years trying to help someone fit into a world they never really understood." A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others looked entertained. "You can buy better clothes," Ryan said. "You can teach etiquette. You can explain business. But you can't force ambition." Someone chuckled. Another person joined in. Then several more. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her clutch. She knew exactly what was happening. Ryan was using her as the punchline. Again. Only this time there were hundreds of witnesses. "Ryan." His mother called from a nearby table, smiling behind her champagne glass. "Be nice." The room laughed. Ryan laughed too. "I am being nice." His eyes never left Evelyn. "Honestly, if anything, I've been too patient." The laughter grew louder. Evelyn heard it bouncing from wall to wall. She could feel eyes sliding toward her from every direction. She could almost hear people deciding who she was. The wife who never quite belonged. The woman holding him back. The embarrassment. Ryan raised his glass. "Some people are meant for greatness." Another pause. "Others are just meant to watch." Applause erupted. Evelyn felt something crack quietly inside her. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough to change the shape of her heart. She expected anger. Instead, she felt tired. Deeply tired. Across the room, Ryan accepted handshakes and congratulations as if he had just delivered something profound. Guests gathered around him. Cameras flashed. The celebration continued. But Evelyn noticed something no one else seemed to see. Ryan never looked happy anymore. Victorious, yes. Proud, certainly. But not happy. She turned toward the nearest exit. The music resumed behind her. Laughter followed. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked where she was going. Halfway to the ballroom doors, she heard Ryan's voice again, loud enough to carry. "Don't worry," he joked to a group of guests. "She'll be fine. She's used to being in the background." More laughter. Evelyn stopped for a moment. The marble floor reflected the chandelier light beneath her feet. She stared at her own reflection. Then she lifted her chin. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. Somewhere deep inside, beyond the humiliation and the hurt, a door was opening. Ryan thought tonight was the end of her story. He had no idea it was only the beginning. The cold night air greeted Evelyn before the ballroom doors had fully closed behind her. The music faded instantly. 1 second there had been crystal chandeliers, champagne, and laughter. The next there was only the quiet hum of downtown Chicago traffic and the distant sound of a siren somewhere beyond the river. She stood on the stone steps outside the hotel and wrapped her arms around herself. November wind swept through the street, tugging loose strands of blonde hair across her face. Behind her, the wedding celebration continued without interruption. The party had moved on. Ryan had made sure of that. Evelyn looked through the glass entrance one last time. She could still see guests smiling beneath the golden lights. She could still see Ryan standing at the center of attention. His hand rested casually in his pocket while people laughed at something he said. He looked completely at ease, as if humiliating his wife in front of 300 people had been no more significant than ordering another drink. Evelyn turned away. Her heels clicked softly against the sidewalk as she started walking. She did not know exactly where she was going. She only knew she could not stay there. The city stretched around her in reflections of glass and steel. Office towers glowed against the dark sky. Traffic lights changed from red to green. A cold breeze carried the smell of rain. She walked 3 blocks before stopping beneath an awning outside a closed bookstore. Her phone buzzed inside her purse. Ryan. She stared at the screen. For a moment she considered ignoring it. Then she answered. "Where are you?" His voice was sharp. No greeting. No concern. Just irritation. "I left." Silence. Then an annoyed exhale. "I can see that. Why would you leave during my sister's wedding?" Evelyn almost laughed. The question sounded absurd. "Ryan, you humiliated me in front of everyone. You are being dramatic." The words arrived instantly, as if he had rehearsed them for years. It was a joke. Evelyn looked across the street at a bakery window decorated with white lights. A young couple walked past holding hands. Neither of them looked richer than she and Ryan had been when they first met. Yet they looked happier. "A joke is supposed to be funny," she said quietly. Ryan sighed again. "You always do this. You make everything about yourself." The words settled over her like snow. Familiar. Predictable. Exhausting. "Come back to the hotel," Ryan continued. "People are asking questions. Not asking where she was. Not asking if she was okay. Just asking questions." Evelyn finally understood the difference. "I am not coming back." Another pause. Longer this time. "Fine," Ryan said coldly. "Do whatever you want." The line disconnected. Evelyn lowered the phone slowly. She stood there for several seconds, staring at the dark screen. Then she slipped it back into her purse and kept walking. The apartment was quiet when she arrived. It occupied the 23rd floor of a luxury building overlooking Lake Michigan. Ryan had insisted on buying it 2 years earlier. According to him, successful people needed successful addresses. Evelyn stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The silence felt enormous. She kicked off her shoes and placed them neatly by the entrance. The city lights flickered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything inside looked expensive. Everything looked perfect. Nothing felt like home. A framed photograph sat on a shelf near the kitchen. Ryan stood beside a groundbreaking ceremony, holding a silver shovel while investors smiled behind him. Evelyn was there too, barely visible at the edge of the picture. She picked up the frame. Her thumb brushed the glass. She remembered that day. Ryan had been nervous before the event. He had barely slept. She had stayed awake with him until 3 in the morning reviewing presentations and financial projections. When the project succeeded, newspaper articles called Ryan a visionary. Nobody mentioned the woman sitting beside him during every late-night strategy session. Evelyn returned the photo to the shelf. Then she walked toward the study. Ryan rarely used the room anymore. Most nights, he preferred networking dinners and private clubs. The office smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Bookshelves lined the walls. Awards occupied an entire cabinet. Evelyn sat behind the desk and looked around. For years she had believed Ryan built everything himself. For years she had repeated that story because he repeated it. But sitting there alone, another memory surfaced. Then another. Then another. The original business proposal. The first investor presentation. The branding concept. The expansion plan. She had helped create all of them. Not because she wanted credit. Because she believed they were building something together. Her gaze drifted toward a storage cabinet tucked beneath the bookshelf. She had not opened it in years. Almost without thinking, she crossed the room and pulled the door open. Several old boxes sat inside. Dust covered the lids. Evelyn lifted the nearest box onto the floor and opened it. Folders, sketchbooks, legal documents, business notes. She flipped through them slowly. A small smile touched her lips despite everything. These were pieces of a different life. A younger life. Back when ambition felt exciting instead of exhausting. Then she found a familiar black notebook. Her smile vanished. Evelyn opened it carefully. Every page contained drawings, floor plans, furniture concepts, boutique hotel layouts, luxury residential ideas. Hundreds of designs filled the notebook. Her designs. Projects she created years ago before giving up architecture to support Ryan's career. She turned another page. Then another. Her pulse slowed. Something felt different. Not sad. Not nostalgic. Something else. She reached the final section of the notebook and froze. Tucked between two pages was a proposal she had completely forgotten. A concept she had spent months developing before abandoning it. An innovative design platform that connected interior designers directly with luxury property developers. Her eyes scanned the handwritten notes, the market projections, the business model, the branding concepts. Suddenly she remembered. She had shown this idea to Ryan years ago. He had laughed. He told her it was unrealistic, too ambitious, too complicated. Evelyn stared at the pages. Then she looked toward the skyline beyond the windows. The city lights stretched for miles beneath the dark sky. Somewhere downtown, Ryan was probably still enjoying the wedding reception, still surrounded by applause, still convinced he understood exactly who his wife was. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Evelyn's mouth. For the first time that night, it was genuine. Because hidden inside an old box beneath years of dust, she had just rediscovered something Ryan never managed to take from her. Herself. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale winter sunlight. Chicago shimmered beyond the apartment windows, silver and blue beneath a sky that looked freshly washed. Evelyn had not slept much. The black notebook remained open on the dining table beside a cup of untouched coffee. For hours she had reviewed page after page, tracing old ideas she had buried years ago. Ideas Ryan once dismissed with a laugh. Around 8:30, the front door opened. Ryan stepped inside, carrying his suit jacket over one shoulder. The smell of expensive cologne drifted into the room. He looked tired, but not apologetic. His eyes immediately found Evelyn sitting at the table. "You left quite a scene last night," he said. Evelyn closed the notebook slowly. "I left quietly." Ryan tossed his keys onto the counter. People noticed. There it was again. Not concern. Reputation. Image. Perception. Always perception. He poured himself coffee and glanced toward the notebook. "What is that?" "Something I used to care about." Ryan barely looked at it. "Well, whatever it is, you should probably focus on reality." Evelyn studied him. "What does that mean?" Ryan took a sip and shrugged. "It means you spend too much time living in ideas." His voice remained casual. "The real world is different." For years those words would have hurt her. This morning they felt strangely small. Ryan checked his phone. Several notifications flashed across the screen. He smiled briefly before typing a response. Evelyn noticed how quickly that smile disappeared when he looked at her, almost as if she interrupted the version of himself he preferred. "I have a meeting," he said. "Actually, several meetings." He grabbed his jacket. "Do not spend all day dwelling on last night." Evelyn stood and walked toward the bookshelf near the living room. A framed magazine cover sat among Ryan's awards. Ryan Walker, Visionary Entrepreneur, Innovator of the Year. She picked it up. "Do you remember this project?" Ryan glanced over. "Of course. The luxury residential platform? That project doubled our valuation." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Interesting." Ryan frowned. "Why?" She looked directly at him. "Because it started in this notebook." Silence. Just for a second. Then Ryan laughed. "Come on, Evelyn." "It did. You sketched some concepts years ago." His tone sharpened slightly. "That is not the same thing." He walked toward the door. You always confuse participation with ownership. The words hung in the air after he left. A few seconds later, the apartment door closed. Evelyn remained motionless. Participation with ownership. Outside, traffic moved along Lakeshore Drive. Sunlight reflected across the glass towers downtown. She looked down at the notebook in her hands. Then she opened it to the final pages. Every date, every sketch, every note, documented years before Ryan launched the project. For the first time, she was not seeing memories. She was seeing evidence. And suddenly, the humiliation from the wedding felt smaller than something else. Something far more important. Ryan had not only underestimated her. He had built part of his success on ideas he convinced her did not matter. Evelyn stared out at the city skyline. A calm smile touched her face. The woman who walked out of that ballroom 2 nights ago had been searching for dignity. The woman standing here now had just found something much more valuable. The truth. 3 years later, spring sunlight spilled across the polished concrete floors of a renovated warehouse on the north side of Chicago. The building had once stored industrial equipment. Now it housed one of the fastest-growing luxury interior design firms in the Midwest. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. Large design boards covered the walls. Samples of stone, wood, brass, and fabric filled long tables where teams collaborated over projects worth millions of dollars. At exactly 7:30 every morning, the first person through the door was always Evelyn Carter. She carried the same black notebook she had rediscovered 3 years earlier. The edges were worn now. The pages were covered with fresh notes layered over old dreams. She stepped into the office carrying a paper cup of coffee and paused beside the reception desk. The smell of fresh paint mixed with roasted coffee beans from the cafe downstairs. The quiet hum of possibility filled the building. It was her favorite sound. 3 years earlier, she had walked out of a marriage carrying little more than a notebook and a decision. The divorce had been finalized 6 months after the wedding incident. Ryan had not fought particularly hard. At the time, he considered it a distraction. His company was expanding. Investors were lining up. New developments were launching. He believed Evelyn would eventually disappear into the background exactly as she always had. Instead, she disappeared only long enough to rebuild herself. The first year had been brutal. She worked from a tiny 1-bedroom apartment barely 600 square feet in size. She accepted small projects, boutique coffee shops, independent bookstores, local restaurants. She spent weekends creating presentations and weekdays meeting clients. More than once, she wondered whether Ryan had been right about her. More than once, she stared at unpaid invoices while calculating whether she could afford another month of rent. But every morning, she opened the notebook. Every morning, she returned to the work. Then something changed. A boutique hotel owner hired her to redesign a historic property near Lake Geneva. The project received attention. A magazine featured her work. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. Referrals multiplied. Reputation followed. Success arrived gradually enough that she almost did not notice it happening. Until one day she looked up and realized she had built an entire company. Her assistant approached carrying a tablet. "Good morning, Evelyn." "Morning, Sarah." The New York client moved the conference call to 10. Evelyn nodded. "That works." And the investors from Dallas confirmed for next week. Evelyn smiled. "Perfect." Sarah hesitated. "There is one more thing." She handed over the tablet. A business news article filled the screen. Evelyn glanced at the headline. Walker Development faces liquidity concerns after delayed projects. Her expression remained calm. "Thank you," she said. Sarah studied her carefully. Everyone in the company knew who Ryan Walker was. Few people knew the entire story. "Would you like me to remove articles about him from the media alerts?" Sarah asked gently. Evelyn handed back the tablet. No. Information is not the same thing as emotion." Sarah smiled. "I will remember that." After she left, Evelyn walked toward her office. The room overlooked the river. A wall of windows framed the skyline. Her desk remained surprisingly simple. A laptop, a framed photograph of her parents, the black notebook. Nothing else felt essential. She settled into her chair and opened her email. New proposals, construction updates, client feedback, opportunities. The life she once imagined existed only for other people now belonged entirely to her. Not because someone handed it to her, because she built it. Around noon, she left for a client meeting downtown. The city buzzed with energy beneath clear blue skies. Pedestrians filled sidewalks. Construction cranes dotted the skyline. She crossed Michigan Avenue and entered a luxury hotel where a development group planned a major renovation. The lobby shimmered with marble and gold accents. As she approached the elevators, someone held the door open. "After you." The voice was warm and calm. Evelyn looked up. The man standing there appeared to be in his early 40s. Dark suit, silver watch, relaxed posture, the kind of confidence that did not need an audience. "Thank you," she said. They entered the elevator together. Several other passengers filled the space. Neither spoke for a moment. Then the man glanced toward the design portfolio tucked beneath her arm. "Architect?" he asked. "Interior design? Luxury hospitality?" Evelyn smiled slightly. "That obvious?" "Only because I spend a lot of time in hotels." The elevator stopped on the 22nd floor. Several people exited. The man extended his hand. "Daniel Reed." Evelyn shook it. "Evelyn Carter." Something about the name made him pause. Not recognition. Curiosity. "Nice to meet you, Evelyn Carter." The elevator reached her floor. The doors opened. "You too," she replied before stepping out. She did not think much about the encounter afterward. Her day continued. Meetings, presentations, site visits, decisions, deadlines. By evening, she was back at the office reviewing plans beneath the soft glow of desk lamps. Outside, the river reflected hundreds of city lights. Sarah knocked gently on the office door. "You should probably head home." Evelyn laughed. "Probably." Sarah placed a folder on the desk. "One last thing before you go." Evelyn opened it. Inside was a market report highlighting major development projects across the country. One section had been marked with a yellow tab. She flipped directly to the page. Walker Development. Revenue decline. Financing pressure. Project delays. She read the report carefully, then closed the folder. Somewhere across the city, Ryan Walker was fighting problems he never anticipated. Somewhere across the city, he still probably believed he understood exactly how the world worked. Evelyn stood and looked out at the skyline glowing against the darkening sky. 3 years earlier, she had lost a marriage. 3 years later, she had found a future. And for the first time, their paths were quietly beginning to move toward the same destination. 2 weeks later, rain tapped softly against the windows of Walker Development headquarters. The corner office on the 41st floor overlooked downtown Chicago, but Ryan barely noticed the view anymore. 3 computer screens glowed across his desk. Financial reports, construction updates, investor communications. None of them contained the numbers he wanted to see. He loosened his tie and rubbed his temples. Across the conference table, his chief financial officer shifted uneasily. "The Denver project is delayed again," she said carefully. "Material costs increased another 12%. Ryan stared at the report. "What about Phoenix?" "Permitting issues." "Miami." The room fell silent. That silence answered the question before she did. Ryan stood and walked toward the windows. The city stretched beneath gray clouds. 3 years ago, everything had felt different. Banks returned his calls immediately. Investors competed for meetings. Reporters called him a visionary. Now every conversation seemed to begin with concerns and end with excuses. "There has to be a solution," Ryan said. "There is." His chief financial officer slid another folder across the table. "Outside Capital." Ryan opened it. The logo on the first page belonged to a private investment group he had never heard of. "Who are they?" "Nobody seems to know much." "That is reassuring." "What we do know is impressive." She pointed to several pages. "They have acquired significant positions in real estate, hospitality, infrastructure, and technology over the last 5 years. Ryan scanned the numbers. They were enormous. "And they are interested in us?" "Potentially." Ryan looked up. For the first time all morning, something resembling hope appeared in his expression. "Set up a meeting." Across the city, sunlight poured through the windows of Evelyn's office. She stood beside a scale model of a luxury resort while her design team reviewed final revisions. The room buzzed with energy. Deadlines approached. Clients called. New opportunities arrived almost daily. Sarah entered carrying a folder. The board approved everything. Evelyn smiled. "Excellent." Sarah handed over a second document. "And there is this." Evelyn opened it. Her eyes moved calmly across the page. Walker Development. Emergency financing discussions. Potential investor negotiations. She closed the folder. "Interesting timing." Sarah leaned against the doorway. Do you think he knows? Evelyn looked toward the river beyond the glass. Boats moved slowly through the afternoon sunlight. No, she said softly. Not yet. Her phone buzzed on the desk. An email notification appeared. The sender's name made her pause. Daniel Reed. She opened the message. It contained only one sentence. The meeting has been scheduled for next month. Everything is moving according to plan. Evelyn read the message twice before placing her phone down. 3 years earlier, she had rebuilt her life one project at a time. 3 years earlier, Ryan believed she would fade into the background forever. Now, without realizing it, he was walking toward a door that only she knew was waiting. Outside, the city continued moving beneath the afternoon sun. Somewhere downtown, Ryan was preparing to meet the investor he believed might save his company. And somewhere between those two futures, the distance separating their worlds was growing smaller with every passing day. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Ryan arrived 20 minutes early. He rarely arrived early for anything anymore, but this meeting felt different. The conference room occupied the top floor of a private office tower overlooking the Chicago River. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. Dark wood panels lined the walls. Everything about the space communicated quiet power, not flashy wealth. Serious wealth, the kind that did not need introductions. Ryan adjusted his tie and reviewed the presentation one final time. His company needed capital. More importantly, it needed confidence. Investors had become cautious. Lenders had become selective. This private investment group represented his best opportunity to stabilize everything before the problems became visible to the public. A woman entered carrying a tablet. Good morning, Mr. Walker. Good morning. The principal investor will be joining shortly. Ryan smiled. Excellent. The woman nodded and left. He glanced around the room. No company logos. No photographs. No clues. Whoever operated this investment group clearly preferred privacy. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Ryan checked his watch. Finally, the conference room doors opened. He immediately stood. The first person to enter was Daniel Reed. Ryan recognized him from financial publications and industry events. His pulse quickened. Daniel Reed's reputation carried weight in nearly every major market. If Daniel was involved, the opportunity was even larger than expected. Ryan extended his hand. Mr. Reed, it is a pleasure. Daniel shook it politely. Good morning, Ryan. I appreciate you taking the meeting. The decision is not mine alone. Ryan frowned slightly. Before he could ask what that meant, the doors opened again. Soft footsteps crossed the room. Ryan turned casually, then froze. For one long second, the entire world seemed to stop moving. Evelyn walked into the conference room carrying a leather portfolio. Her blonde hair rested neatly over one shoulder. A tailored ivory blazer replaced the uncertainty he once associated with her. Calm confidence followed her like sunlight. She did not hesitate. She did not look surprised. She simply crossed the room and took the chair at the head of the table. Ryan remained standing, his hand slowly lowered to his side. Evelyn. The name barely escaped his lips. Daniel sat beside her. I believe you know our managing partner. Ryan looked from Daniel to Evelyn and back again. Confusion collided with disbelief. Managing partner? Evelyn placed her portfolio on the table and folded her hands. Through the windows behind her, the Chicago skyline glowed beneath clear morning light. Good morning, Ryan, she said calmly. The same voice. The same woman. Yet somehow not the same at all. Ryan stared at her as realization began forming piece by piece. The investor he believed would save his company. The meeting he had spent weeks preparing for. The opportunity he thought had appeared out of nowhere. It had never been a stranger waiting on the other side of the table. It had been Evelyn all along. Ryan forgot to sit down. For several seconds, he simply stood there staring across the conference table. The woman he had spent years dismissing now occupied the most powerful seat in the room. The city skyline stretched behind her like a backdrop designed specifically for this moment. Sunlight reflected off the glass towers outside, filling the room with a soft golden glow. Evelyn remained calm. She did not smile triumphantly. She did not look angry. She looked exactly like someone who belonged there. Somehow that unsettled Ryan more than any display of emotion could have. I do not understand, he finally said. His voice sounded smaller than he intended. Daniel leaned back comfortably in his chair. I imagine that is temporary. Ryan looked at him, Then back at Evelyn. You are the managing partner? Yes. Of this firm? Yes. Ryan blinked. He glanced toward the documents spread across the conference table as though the answers might be hidden there. 3 years. 3 years had passed since the divorce. 3 years since the wedding reception. 3 years since he watched her walk out of his life. Somehow during that time, she had built something large enough to sit across from him as an investor. The realization felt impossible. How? The question escaped before he could stop it. Evelyn folded her hands. The same way most things are built. One day at a time. Silence settled across the room. Ryan slowly lowered himself into a chair. The leather felt colder than before. He studied her carefully. The woman sitting across from him looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. The nervousness he once associated with her was gone. The hesitation was gone. Even the way she held eye contact had changed. Nothing about her posture asked for approval anymore. Daniel opened a folder. Should we begin? Ryan nodded automatically. The meeting moved forward. Financial projections appeared on screens. Market analyses were discussed. Future opportunities were outlined. Yet Ryan struggled to focus. Every few minutes his attention drifted back to Evelyn. He kept searching for the version of her he remembered. The woman who stood quietly beside him at events. The woman who rarely challenged his opinions. The woman he believed would always remain in the background. She was nowhere to be found. Instead, he found someone who asked sharp questions. Someone who understood financial models. Someone who challenged assumptions with calm precision. Several times, she identified weaknesses in his projections before his own team had noticed them. Each observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. By the end of the first hour, Ryan realized something he never expected. Evelyn understood his business almost as well as he did. Maybe better. Daniel eventually closed his folder. There is potential here. Ryan straightened immediately. That is encouraging to hear. Potential, Daniel repeated carefully, is not the same thing as certainty. Ryan nodded. Of course. Evelyn slid a document across the table. Our analysts identified several concerns. Ryan reviewed the pages. Construction delays. Debt exposure. Cash flow vulnerabilities. Every issue listed was real. Every issue had been quietly growing for months. These problems are manageable, he said. Perhaps. Evelyn's voice remained steady. But only with the right leadership. Ryan looked up sharply. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The city seemed unusually quiet beyond the windows. Finally, Ryan leaned back. You enjoy this, do not you? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Evelyn simply looked at him. Enjoy what? Seeing me sit here asking for help. The words hung in the air. Daniel glanced toward the windows, but said nothing. Evelyn studied Ryan for several seconds before answering. No. Her response arrived without hesitation. If I enjoyed watching people fail, I would have become someone else a long time ago. Ryan looked away first. The answer hit harder than any accusation. Because it was true. The old Evelyn would have defended herself. The new Evelyn did not need to. The meeting concluded shortly afterward. No final decision was announced. Additional reviews were required. More discussions would follow. As Ryan gathered his documents, he hesitated beside the conference table. Daniel had already left the room. Only Evelyn remained. She stood near the windows overlooking the river. Sunlight danced across the water below. Evelyn. She turned. Yes. Ryan searched for something to say. An explanation. A defense. Perhaps even an apology. But every sentence felt inadequate. The years between them suddenly seemed impossible to cross. You have changed, he said quietly. Evelyn looked out toward the skyline once more. A faint smile touched her lips. No, she said. I finally became who I was supposed to be. Ryan followed her gaze toward the city. For the first time, he began to understand the true cost of what he had lost. Not because she was successful, not because she was powerful, but because somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing her clearly. And now, sitting in the shadow of everything she had built without him, he realized she had never been standing behind him at all. She had simply been waiting for her own moment to step into the light. The weeks that followed changed everything. Ryan threw himself into saving Walker Development. He attended investor meetings. He negotiated with lenders. He revised forecasts and reorganized projects. Yet no matter how hard he pushed, the numbers refused to cooperate. Every solution seemed to uncover a larger problem beneath it. Every temporary victory lasted only long enough to reveal another challenge waiting around the corner. Meanwhile, Rumors began circulating throughout the industry. Quiet conversations during conferences, private discussions between executives, mentions buried inside financial newsletters. At first, Ryan ignored them. Then he started hearing the same name repeatedly. Carter Design Group, Evelyn's company. One afternoon, he sat alone in his office reviewing market reports when a headline caught his attention. Carter Design Group secures national hospitality contract. Ryan frowned and opened the article. His eyes moved quickly across the screen. The contract was enormous, larger than many of the development projects his own company was currently pursuing. He continued reading. Then another article appeared in the sidebar. Carter Design Group announces strategic partnership with Reed Capital. Ryan leaned back slowly. Reed Capital. Daniel Reed. A strange feeling settled in his stomach. He opened a second report, then a third, then a fourth. By the end of the hour, his desk was covered with printed pages. Revenue growth, expansion plans, market valuations, acquisitions, partnerships, numbers that seemed impossible. Yet there they were. Documented, verified, public. Walker Development was fighting to survive. Carter Design Group was expanding into multiple states. Ryan stared at the figures. For years, he had measured success using scale, market influence, revenue, visibility. Now the comparison felt unavoidable. Evelyn's company was no longer a boutique design firm. It had become something much larger, something strategically positioned inside sectors that continued growing while traditional development struggled. His phone buzzed. It was his chief financial officer. You need to see this. What now? The rankings were released. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Send them. A document arrived seconds later. National Industry Growth Rankings. Walker Development appeared near the bottom. Carter Design Group appeared near the top. Ryan read the page twice. Then a third time. The office suddenly felt very quiet. Across the city, Evelyn stood inside a newly completed luxury resort overlooking Lake Michigan. Sunlight streamed through massive glass walls. Guests moved through elegant spaces her team had designed from concept to completion. Soft music drifted through the lobby. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Sarah approached carrying a tablet. The client loves everything. Evelyn smiled. That is always good news. There is more. Sarah handed over the device. Financial analysts were discussing Carter Design Group during a business segment. A commentator described the company as one of the most influential emerging firms in the country. Another praised its expansion strategy. A third highlighted its partnership with Daniel Reed. Evelyn listened quietly before handing the tablet back. Interesting. Sarah laughed. Interesting. Success becomes dangerous when people start believing their own headlines. Sarah shook her head. You really are impossible to impress. Not impossible. Evelyn looked across the lobby where her team celebrated the completed project. Just careful. Later that evening, a private industry gala filled a historic ballroom downtown. Executives, investors, developers, and entrepreneurs gathered beneath crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed ceilings. Conversations flowed between tables. Glasses reflected warm light. Ryan arrived shortly after 7. The moment he entered, he noticed something unusual. People were not discussing his latest project. They were discussing Evelyn. Several groups stopped to greet her as she moved through the room. CEOs introduced themselves. Investors sought conversations. Industry leaders treated her as an equal. Ryan watched from across the ballroom. 3 years earlier, she had stood alone during a wedding reception while people laughed at her expense. Tonight, the room seemed to bend naturally toward her presence. Not because she demanded attention, because she had earned it. Then Daniel Reed entered. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Several executives approached him immediately. Ryan observed the reactions carefully. He had spent years trying to build that level of influence. Daniel navigated the room effortlessly before eventually stopping beside Evelyn. They exchanged a few words and laughed softly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing inappropriate. Just two respected partners comfortable in each other's company. Yet the image struck Ryan harder than he expected, because he finally understood something that had escaped him for years. Daniel did not look down on Evelyn. He did not tolerate her presence. He did not treat her as an accessory to his success. He respected her. Completely. Publicly. Naturally. A realization settled over Ryan with painful clarity. He had spent years believing Evelyn needed someone else's success to matter. Now he stood in a ballroom full of powerful people watching them recognize her value without any help from him. Near the center of the room, Daniel raised a glass during a brief speech. "Success is never built alone," he said. "The strongest leaders create opportunities for others to rise with them." Applause followed. Daniel smiled and glanced toward Evelyn. "Which is why tonight I would like to recognize someone whose vision changed the trajectory of an entire industry." More applause filled the ballroom. Ryan felt his chest tighten. Daniel continued, "Please join me in congratulating Evelyn Carter." The room erupted. People stood. Glasses lifted. Smiles spread across faces throughout the ballroom. Evelyn looked genuinely surprised by the standing ovation. She thanked everyone with quiet grace before returning to her seat. Ryan remained motionless. Around him, hundreds of successful people celebrated the woman he once believed would never amount to anything. And for the first time, the truth became impossible to ignore. He had not lost her because she lacked potential. He had lost her because he never bothered to see it. The gala ended just before midnight. Guests slowly filtered toward the exits while staff cleared tables beneath the fading glow of chandeliers. Outside, Chicago shimmered beneath a sky filled with city lights. A cool breeze moved through the streets as black cars lined the curb waiting for passengers. Evelyn stepped out of the ballroom, carrying her coat over one arm. The evening had been exhausting in the best possible way. She paused near the entrance and looked up at the skyline. For a moment, she simply enjoyed the quiet. Then she heard her name. "Evelyn." She turned. Ryan stood several feet away. The crowd around them continued moving, but somehow the space between them felt still. He looked older than she remembered. Not physically, just tired, like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. Evelyn waited. Ryan slipped his hands into his pockets. For once, he seemed unsure of himself. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. Evelyn nodded politely. "A minute." Ryan glanced toward the street before looking back at her. "I have replayed that night more times than I can count." He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "The wedding, the things I said, the way I treated you." Evelyn remained silent. "At the time, I thought success made me right." His eyes lowered briefly. "Now I realize success just made me louder." The sounds of traffic echoed through the distance. A taxi passed beneath a streetlight. Somewhere across the avenue, music drifted from a restaurant patio. Ryan exhaled slowly. "I was wrong about you." Evelyn studied him carefully. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just honesty. "Yes," she said quietly. Ryan nodded as though he expected that answer. "I kept thinking if I worked hard enough, earned enough, built enough, everything would make sense." He looked toward the ballroom doors behind them. "But standing in there tonight, watching what you built, I finally understood something." Evelyn waited. Ryan smiled sadly. "You were never holding me back." The words hung between them. "I was too busy looking down on you to see who you really were." For a long moment, neither spoke. 3 years earlier, she might have cried. 3 years earlier, she might have begged him to understand. Tonight, she simply listened. Because she no longer needed anything from him. Ryan looked at her one last time. "If I could change it, I would." Evelyn pulled on her coat. The night air felt cool against her skin. "I know." Ryan blinked, surprised. "You do?" She nodded. "People who are happy do not spend years regretting the past." The truth landed gently. Not cruelly. Just honestly. Ryan looked away toward the city lights. "Is there any chance?" He stopped himself before finishing the sentence. Evelyn smiled. It was warm, genuine, and final. "You did not lose me tonight, Ryan." His eyes met hers. "You lost me the day you stopped seeing my worth." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Acceptance. The kind that arrives when there is nothing left to argue with. A black car pulled up to the curb. Daniel stepped out and opened the passenger door. He did not interrupt. He simply waited. Evelyn glanced toward him, then back at Ryan. "Take care of yourself." Ryan nodded slowly. "You too." She entered the car. The door closed softly behind her. As the vehicle pulled away, Ryan remained standing beneath the city lights. He watched the car disappear into traffic until it became impossible to distinguish from all the others. Then he looked up at the skyline. Across the river, one building stood illuminated against the night. Near the top, bright letters displayed the name Carter Design Group. Ryan stared at it for a long time. Not with jealousy, not with resentment, just understanding. Because the greatest punishment had never been losing his company, his status, or his influence. It was realizing that the woman he once treated as invisible had become extraordinary without him. And the greatest victory was never revenge. It was that Evelyn no longer needed to look back.